Gehe, and I am the Executive Director for Tyco Community Alliance. We're really excited to have you join us for our 5th webinar in our Doros and Cents series, which is all about the financial stuff, the fundraising stuff, the stuff that supports Tyco without involving the Tyco itself. I always joke that these sessions are a lot like eating your vegetables. They're so important to sustain a Tyco group or a Tyco artist, but not everyone devotes the time to listen to this stuff or eat their veggies, right? So thank you all for being here today. If you are registered for this and you can't make it, the recording will be sent out. Our members will get access to the recording first, and then it will go out to the community at large thereafter. But today's topic really is all about searching for grants. And I jokingly say, show me the money, right? Because you can't apply for a grant if you don't know there's one out there. And that's what we're going to look at today. What I'd really like to do is go through the slides themselves first, and then I'd like to just share screen with my internet browser and show you how me and TCA look for grants in a couple of different platforms so that you get that experience and you're familiar with that. And then we can open it up to question and answer. Question and answer will not be recorded. So it's, special for the people that attend live. And it's also, you can ask, I think, more openly your questions if there's any details and stuff there. So let's get started. The things we're going to share today really is a high-level, broad strokes overview of what the grant funding sources look like and what that environment looks like here in the United States and mostly in Canada. A lot of this echoes that in Europe too, but we're going to focus on North American structures today. We're going to talk about why it's important to learn how to navigate this environment, and then we're going to review federal spaces like grants.gov and other grants databases. And then there's 5 strategies in searching for grants that I just want to share with you. A lot of people think there's only one right way to do this, but there are many different approaches to finding money and finding resources. And these are just 5 that I have used in the past myself and that TCA has deployed itself in the past as well that we want to share with you. But really it's about finding that best fit for you and your group. Then we'll talk about tips and tricks and go through that internet walkthrough, and then we'll have the question and answer after that. The funding environment itself, it comes in 5 major categories. So, and this applies again to US, Canada, most of Europe, but you have your government-based grants and funding. You have foundation-based grants, which are private. And then you have individual grants, AKA patronage. So this is, picture during the Renaissance, there would be somebody like a Da Vinci character that could exist as a full-time artist because they had a patron that supported their art, their lifestyle, this, that, or their expenses. That still exists in contemporary art industry, but it is definitely not as common. So that's individual grants or patronage. Sponsorships, which you would likely get from a local business or a corporation to support like a project or a element of what your Tyco group's working on. And then there's partnerships, which can be called collaboratives. They can be called co-ops. It's when you are fundraising with another group or another person so that you're both mutually benefiting from the fundraising. The first 3 are going to be the focus of today's discussion because sponsorships and partnerships are going to be a different fundraising process, and it's a different Doros and Cents webinar that we're addressing this year. So nice purple bubbles are our overview of federal government, okay? And I'm going to use locally in Arizona, me in this case, but the federal government here in the United States earmarks a certain amount of money to go to the arts. There's a whole complicated government structure on how they determine these budgets. They always get a little tight and crazy around election years, as do every other budget in every other department for every other purpose within the federal government. But once that money is approved and budgeted, they distribute it to 2 different spaces. They go to the national endowments. So you'll see things like National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, right? That's at the federal level. They serve the entire nation. And then there's other designated national or state agencies that also receive federal funding. Example, where I live in Tucson is Arizona Commission of the Arts. Okay, so that's the designated state agency for Arizona. In California, they actually call it California Arts Council. So it just depends. Each state in the US is a little different, as is each province in Canada. Okay. National endowments typically break down their funding to support program-based grants or specialty grants. And specialty grants usually happen for one of two reasons. They got a whole bunch of money they weren't planning on from the federal government, and they got to spend it that year or lose it. Or COVID happens and they get other types of money coming at them sideways that, again, they're pressured to spend, but they have to create a program to support it and sustain it. Okay. Program grants and specialty grants always go to either individual artists or organizations, depending on the nature of the program and the eligibility. Okay. With state agencies, it's very similar, except for you also split down from state agencies. You could get state or even city related programs specific to like an entity, like a township. That's not an organization, it's not an individual, right? So municipalities as a whole could actually apply for state funding through a state agency as part of this structure as well. That's federal and government money, okay? So now state government money, it's kind of blowing up that pyramid on the right. So let's say that our state designated agency or administrating organization, Arizona Commission of the Arts, has some programs and specialty grants too. They mirror the structure of the national endowments very similarly, but there's also state-driven initiatives that maybe just things within the county can apply for or a township can apply for. This is kind of just a smaller scope version of what we see in the federal or national, I'll say national for Canada, government structure. These are a little different from the city, but not much. So federal delivers money to a state agencies deliver money to city agencies, and the city agencies have their own series of program grants, city initiative grants. This is where you get local like arts projects or gardening projects that get sponsored by the city of whatever. And then they also have programs that maybe support a longer term goal of either fundraising for a city initiative, this, that, or the other. So then you can qualify to apply for that funding if you're within the district, depending on the nature of the program. So see, it starts very big and gets very, very small, but the structure generally echoes itself over and over again, where you're either an individual or you're part of a group, and then you're applying based on whatever qualifications you have. Foundations, because they are privately owned, work totally different. They're much more flat. And that's because most people within foundations are largely like family trusts and things like that, where it's owned and operated by a very small group of people, and they have the autonomy to make the decisions of how they spend their funds, basically. So foundations like to, they typically fund projects or people under whatever parameters or guidelines their foundation deems fit. So TCA has applied and received funding from a couple of different foundations in the past year. One of them was based on us being a TICO group. Oh, can everyone hear me okay?
I think we lost it for a minute. I think we're back now, though.
Okay.
I hear you. I got you now.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know what you said before that. Sorry.
No problem. Where did you lose me, Yasko?
I don't know because you were just talking and I couldn't figure out what you were saying. Sorry.
Yeah, so let's go back one slide just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So federal government trickles down to the state, and then the state trickles down to the city, and they're all pretty much similar pyramids, right? You've got program grants, specialty grants, or some locality-based grant that's offered within each of those pyramids. And you as an individual artist or a TICO group or like an organization, right, can apply for those based on different criteria and opportunity. So that's the federal and state funded part of things. But then if we go over to foundations, much different scenario. Foundations are privately owned and operated. They typically will fund a project or a person based on if it resonates with them for whatever reason or criteria they establish. A lot of times the grant application process looks different as well. So if you've ever heard of the acronym LOI, or a letter of interest, a letter of inquiry, a lot of people have to submit those to foundations to see if they are on the radar of the foundation in the first place. If they are, the foundation will allow them to apply for funding. If they're not, they'll say, no, we will not take your application at this time. So it's a totally different process than like a public access grant where everyone has the equal opportunity to seek out and apply for it based on eligibility. So those are the big main structures of grant funding. And it's important to know the ins and outs of these and how they work, because it would not make sense for me applying for like a city level grant to go talk to a national endowment about my grant project, right? They don't technically manage that part of it. Once the money is distributed downward, it's that entity, that agency that actually controls and operates that program. So I hope that makes sense. Patronage, for what it's worth, is very similar to foundations because they're privately owned. So if everyone's a nerd like me, you know Bruce Wayne, right? Batman, billionaire guy. Let's say he's the affluent individual. He could fund whatever person or project he wanted. It's his call, right? Because it's his money. He spends it that's exactly how patronage works. And foundations, same way, but it's a foundation instead of an individual doing the funding. For big comparison, side by side, government grants are always going to offer you the biggest pool of money, the biggest grant awards. You also establish higher scale credibility and visibility for a group, because you know how cool is it to brag that you got some national such and such award, right? The cons, though, because that big money's there is more competition. At least here in the US, I don't know how it's going to be in Canada for our Canadian tyco groups, but it is a lengthy, complex application process for government-based grants. And there are a lot of funding restrictions. So depending on how freely you want to use that funding, that could be something that informs your decision to not seek out government grants for that project or whatever you're working on. Foundation grants are kind of in the middle. They have moderate funding, simpler applications, but like I was saying, most applications are actually handpicked to apply. So it's kind of about who you know with a foundation grant, sometimes depending on how they're structured. Of course, there's funding restrictions there too. With patronage and also just getting donations from donors, there is a likelihood to get repeat funds from donors. And sometimes there's no applications. At TCA, of course, like we get donations as a nonprofit from all directions, and we do not need to apply for those. Those are just people that are invested in our mission or our programs, and they want to support the community in that way. The cons, though, with relying solely on donations is you must maintain active and engaged relationship with those funders and those donors, just like anything else, or that funding will, slowly stave off. And there also is something called like a restricted donation or a restricted fund that individuals and companies in North America have the privilege, the right to impose. So like if I was going to say we've got Nanaimo Taiko here in the room. So, hey, I'm going to donate $500 to Nanaimo Taiko, but I only want it to be used for buying new bocce. Now you've got restricted funds in your account specifically for that purpose because the donor designated that at the time of giving it to you. So there's lots of different things with the grant funding world that exists. But none of it really matters if you can't find the grants and then get the grants in the first place. So that's what we're going to transition into next. And that's exactly why you want to learn to navigate these things. Funding and budgets do flux annually for funding organizations and for foundations, just like with the legislative and the political waves that affect everything else, like in public programming or community-based programming, right? So you want to keep your ear to the ground and be sensitive to those things. That's not political commentary one way or the other. That's just how it happens every time there's an election or every time there's budgetary decisions being made. They kind of don't spend until they know what money they have to spend, right? So things dry up in waves. We're seeing that a little bit this year, actually. So this is, at least in the United States, a new election year. All of the pandemic relief funding has essentially been spent or dried up. So now everyone is not spending at all, not funding projects at all until they have a better idea of what next year is going to look like, right? That makes the grant environment very competitive and very, very, very difficult to get funding in. And, that informs, like, at least at TCA, like how we do our business because of that reality in that situation. So learning that type of relationship is really critical and important. Also, building relationships to help connect you to more opportunities is huge. This is especially true for city and state level funding, because you don't know which member of your group has a cousin that's a senator, right? Like, you don't know until you ask, and that could potentially be huge opportunity for you. So continue asking your audience, um, any of your volunteers or your board, whatever you can to open up more opportunities. And then knowing the structure of funding, in my opinion, helps reduce stress because you know who to contact, and you know, like, where the bottlenecks are if money is not getting distributed when it's supposed to you, because you have a better handle of those things. So that's why all of this is important. And now the fun stuff. Let's go looking at some grants and some databases. So grants.gov, at least in the US, is the federal database for government issued grants. Most endowments and national agencies will do, they call it a NOFO, NOFO. It's an acronym that stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity. Okay, so that acronym is very important to set up a grants.gov login because it is free to every individual. You need to be currently registered with the SAM system, which is transitioning to the UEI system. And there are links for that directly on SAM or grants.gov. You cannot share your login credentials with anyone else. Some folks do this and they get in trouble for it, and it affects their eligibility to apply for grants. This also is a platform that requires two-factor authentication. So just heads up on what this one looks like. We're going to do a tour of it in a couple of minutes. Other grants databases that are just businesses, right? This is like software as a service type stuff. There are websites that exist like Instrumental, Candid, which is now known as the Foundation Directory Online, Grant Watch, Grant Station, Grant Select, Grant Gopher. There's tons. My only advice with these is really vet them and understand the quality of the information that they're sharing and how much they're going to charge you, because they will charge you to have like an annual subscription to their database. Some will be really cool and give you some detail where you could even maybe try to find it with a separate internet search, the funding opportunities. But some folks will only show the title of the grant award. And then when you click on it, it's like, sign up now for your 12 months of whatever. So we'll go into that and what that looks like. The two that TCA has used in the last 12 months is Candid and Grants Watch. So just take that with a grain of salt. That's not necessarily an endorsement for them. I like them, but there are so many options out there for grant searching databases now. There's 5 strategies to looking for grants, and I'll give you an example of it when we do our live tour of the internet. The mantra, though, is you don't know till you try. So no matter what strategy you adopt, you don't know till you ask, right? The first one is to start small and go big. So begin looking at the city level for grants first in your area, then move to the state and then the national grants. You get to find local foundations this way as well that serve the city or the state only. There are quite a few out there, actually. You can also identify companies or affluent donors in your area to help figure out how you can start building those relationships and get funding that way too. This approach allows you to scale and grow over time. It can also help you build your confidence. If you've never written a big federal grant before, it can be kind of intimidating. And you can essentially practice a couple times at the city level if that's something you're more comfortable doing. So that's approach number 1. Approach number 2 is the opposite. Start big and go small. I call this one swinging for the fences. So apply for those big national grants, then move to the state, then move to the city. Find national or international foundations that serve your project. Identify companies and donors of the arts, not just Tyco, right? To figure out how you can build those relationships. And honestly, like I said, you don't know unless you ask. So this approach actually might sound a little intimidating to some, but it has worked well for me in the past. And if you apply for something at a larger level and don't make it, you still have the benefit of starting to build rapport and relationships with those funders and the staff that work at those organizations, which is really, really important. Strategy 3 is sideways funding. So this is where I tell people to look at grants that have nothing to do with Tyco, but all the other stuff that Tyco kind of is like, right? We're pretty niche. It's very difficult. To my knowledge, in North America, TCA is the only funder of Tyco specific grants. So if that's the case, where do you go to look? You got to look at things like cultural arts funding, Asian arts funding, music grants, percussion-based things, community grants, preservation grants, because tradition preservation is part of what we do, right? And then there's also health and wellness. There are a lot of different ways to fund Tyco. You just have to find the right angle in, right? And so that's the sideways strategy approach, is to go on a grant hunt for maybe an hour, looking for everything but the word Tyco in the grant and see what comes up. Yep. Strategy 4, word of mouth. This is where you really rally your Tyco group, your community, your audience, your board to gather contacts about who's connected to who knows so-and-so at a foundation, who knows of a big arts donor in our area. Your collective network, right, is going to reach much farther than you actually can realize right now. So why not start with a goal like this month we want to get 5 new donors, or this month we want to hit 100 people on our email list for donor outreach, or whatever that benchmark looks for you. Progress is progress, and this one might be a more incremental step process to getting you funding, but it does help over time. It really does. And the final one is not really strategy. I call it the TCA method. I'm just going to be transparent and share what we do constantly here at TCA, right? So we are looking for grants all the darn time. Our development manager, Brandon, that is his job. For at least 15 hours of the week, he is looking for grant opportunities, attending information sessions about grant programs, really trying to get us plugged in to the grants world better as an organization. We apply at minimum at least for 1 large federal grant and 1 small either city or state grant a month. We also seek donations passively as many places as possible, which is convenient because we do that integrated with our other programs already. And then we also use our programming to help grow our support. That support looks like our membership base. That looks like how the Tyco community itself has grown over time, those types of things. So again, this is like more of an attitude and a method than it is like a different strategy. You can do all the other 4 while incorporating something like this. But we here at TCA never stop writing grants. We'd rather get the rejection and know we at least tried than not pursue it at all. That's kind of our position. That reasonably, though, let's be honest, may not be something that your group or whoever is writing grants for your group has the bandwidth to do, right? If this is something they're doing on the side, they don't have time to write 20 grants and see if one sticks. They have to pick the one, right, that they're going to hope really works for them. That approach is totally appropriate too. It's really about finding the best fit for your needs at the individual or the group level. So I hope that makes sense. The tips and tricks, right? Take it 1 step at a time. Progress is progress. Find a strategy and a goal that you're comfortable with. If you achieve that goal, I'm so happy, but push further and further. A lot of times we forget that once we cross the finish line, there's a next race, right, that we're going to run after that. I encourage people to continue moving that bar, moving that line, so that the group can grow over time. And apply for the grants that you're comfortable with. This is not just about the size or the complexity of the application. Don't sign up for a grant where you've got to do all of this reporting every 2 weeks and give them like your firstborn kid. Don't do that. Sign up for the grants that you, if you were awarded, could reasonably operate with for your Tyco group. And then ask friends, social media, and TCA for help. We try to be an open book and as available as possible to folks for grants questions. Sometimes it's even stuff like, we want to apply for this grant, but we need some statistics on the Tyco community. Can you share those with us? Yes, that's why we do our Tyco census every 4 years. And simple plug, if you haven't done it yet, please fill it out. That data is really helpful for things such as this, right? So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and switch to a different screen. And can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see grants.gov? Perfect. Thank you so much. So it's connected, as with most things, to a lot of other different things. My favorite spaces on grants.gov are learning about grants. This will help with anyone, regardless of experience level. Grants 101, I learn new stuff from that because they update it every couple of years. So I actually pop into that every once in a while to see. There's also different things like grant terminology that's incredibly useful. So if you're not familiar with NOFO, which is a crazy acronym that they came up with, like what does that mean and what is it for, right? There's also different systems that they talk about within the federal government. So the Learn Grants is very useful. The one that we use the most here at TCA obviously is the search for grants. So we're going to log in real quick because I think I timed out. And we're going to search for grants. Federal grants in Canada and in the US have either some opportunity number or identification number. So when they enter them into this searchable database from whatever department that grant is coming from, like it's all coded a very specific way so that you can talk very specifically about the award you're looking for. There's also the opportunity title, the agency that's funding it, the opportunity status, and if there's any deadlines or posted dates within the notice. So you can search by any one of these. The ones I like to look at, of course, are not the forecasted ones, but the posted ones, because forecasted is not guaranteed. You're going to see more and more forecasted stuff pop up in this space until our 2025 federal budget is approved. So, and once it's posted, like you can apply and take a look at it. There's also a searchability here. So we've got those co-op grants we talked about. We're just going to look at regular grants, and you can look at the individual level. You can look at the city or the township level, and you can look at nonprofit organizations. So we'll look at a nonprofit organization because my Tyco group and TCA both happen to be those things. And you're going to click on arts. So right now they have mostly posted, which is nice, and a couple of forecasted grant opportunities. Some of these are going to be very specific or niche, like U.S. Embassy work in Madagascar probably would not be a good fit for TCA, but maybe the National Endowment of the Arts grants for arts projects might be a good one. So if you click on that, they open up what is called your grant package, and this includes all of the information that they need for their database under general information and eligibility. And then the additional information usually is a hyperlink to the program guidelines on somebody's direct website. They also put the point of contact here, which is kind of a generic inbox, just my personal preference. If I could try to get like a first and last name on somebody and contact them directly, I try to do that because sometimes these go unanswered. Grants.gov will also give you version history. So if you are applying for this grant multiple times or you have multiple drafts of an application, your profile will actually log that for you. And then related documents to the application will reflect here when you upload them to the portal. And the total package will look like this, which basically serves as your ability to track it. So you can preview your application, you can outright apply for the application, and any status updates would populate here once you apply as well. So that's grants.gov. We'll go back to that main search engine again. Now, this is one of those things where if you wanted to do that sideways look at stuff, so we'll do arts again. There's a small grants competition, and I don't know the code for this agency, so let's take a look at what this one is. Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation. So that could be promising, right, as a Tyco grant, but then you look at where the funding agency is and you go, this is about Egyptian cultural preservation, not Japanese cultural preservation. So maybe that's not a good fit, right? So very quickly, like you can start scanning for keywords and key areas of an application form or an application notice to see if it's going to be a good fit for you or not. So that's the government one in a nutshell. You can also track your applications this way. If there are funders that are actively plugging in notices into this database, this is their set of tools. And then if there's any stock standard forms, which sometimes you may need for a grant application, they should be available here. This is an important one, planned UEI updates. So it used to be SAM, SAM, and DUNS numbers, DUNS, that you had to register for each year to apply for federal funding in the United States. They are going away with DUNS numbers and have for about 4 years been transitioning to UEI numbers instead. So it's really important to understand where your organization is in current status on these things and have those numbers handy, just like a tax ID or any other pertinent information like that. This website will give you like updates on where we're at in the grant funding world and how that relates to UEI numbers. Okay, so this one, thumbs up if you can see it for me, is grantswatch.com. This one for an individual person is probably between $100 and $150 for a year to access. And you pretty much, if you get a grant from this thing, you earn it back with your first grant, which is nice. But I've gotten a lot of uses out of this. This one also has a way bigger pool of resources. So instead of a couple of thousand grants that the government owns, this connects you to foundations, other funders, and this is US and Canada based, this platform. So now we're looking at potentially close to 28,000 grants that are open right now in North America. So when you search, we'll go to nonprofits, but you can also search by individual. We're going to choose location. You can select different provinces of Canada, different United States. You can select all. We'll just do national level. We'll start big. And we're going to do arts and culture again. So there's 104 grants specifically for nonprofits that are on national level for arts and culture. Now, if I go to click on view full grant for any one of these, we'll see the major funding source, the geographic focus, the deadlines, and the actual description or outline of the grant. This gives you a lot more helpful information on a single page, whereas I feel grants.gov is kind of the master at redirecting you to this page and this page and this page and this page. This grant right here is for public impact projects at smaller organizations. That could be a Tyco group, but these are the categories in which they're looking for outcomes from your project. So just be honest and say, hey, is this something we could apply for? Yes or no. RFP, if you're not familiar with that acronym, is a request for proposal. Some grants operate on that similar to an LOI process. Each funder is a little bit different there. And it looks like it has a lot of links to informational webinars. I love grants that do information sessions to prepare you for how to apply for it from them themselves. This is a much larger grant because it's on the national level. So they're looking to fund approximately 30 people with up to $25,000 each for a total project of $750,000 that they got to spend for this program. So that makes sense. And then the funding period. So does your project fall within these dates? Yes or no, right? And then contact information. And again, these are pretty general, but there's some addresses and phone numbers, which is nice. So you might have a better chance of reaching a human if you have questions that you need answered in a timely manner. So this is an example of a grant searching platform that has worked out really well for myself personally and TCA. We can go back. You can also search. So let's change this. Let's say like you're just an individual Tyco player. Are there grants for you? Actually, there's close to 100 right now in the United States supporting the arts. So does your professional Tyco career, can it get support in this way? Yes or no? Actually, yes, there's a lot of cool things. This one right here is funded by Pacific Islanders in Communications. And it's about making a short film about topics related to AAPI community. Tyco fits into that, right? So how can we make that, how can we spin that to be a viable application for something like this that also funds $25,000 potentially, but it is not a national, it's not a big national agency. It is a private funder that's doing this. It's a foundation. So this is the type of stuff, the dialogue that I have internally when we start prospecting and vetting grants here at TCA. There are tons of opportunities. There really are. Most of it really comes down to finding the ones you want to apply for and then applying for them. I cannot tell you how many people get, what's the other acronym? FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So they are so fearful of missing out on the next perfect grant notice that they're going to get that they end up getting like FOMO, NOFO, and then it almost paralyzes them and then they don't apply for anything. It's like, well, you're definitely not getting any grant money then, right? So this is the process in a nutshell that we will go through over and over again here at TCA. But this is something that you, and whatever works for your group, right? You designate a specific time, maybe like an hour a month or an hour a week, to just looking for things. And then you figure out based on the deadlines, do you have time to apply for this? Yes or no? So I'm going to stop sharing. That is the end of like grants management in a nutshell. And especially at least how we do it here at TCA. So now we're going to open the floor for questions, which means I'm going to stop screen share and I'm going to stop the recording.